Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In this talk, I'm going to look at a thesis. It's by Sarah Tyberg, and it's called, it's basically about a lot of the mass shootings that have taken place in the USA over the last 20 years. And she proposes her theory for why these mass shootings are happening. And she suggests that the idea is misogyny. And I'm going to challenge this idea because I think it's a load of rubbish. More generally, we're anti-feminists, so we come here to Speaker's Corner to talk about issues to do with feminism, and it's a challenge to that, and an intellectual challenge to what's happening in this feminist movement. So her thesis is called Entitlement and Anguish, an analysis of masculinity and misogyny in American school shootings. Tyberg discusses a series of mass shootings enacted primarily by young white men in the USA in the last 20 years, and asserts the reasons for these shootings is misogyny. She first discusses the Elliot Rodger killings in Isla Vista on May the 23rd, 2014. Elliot was a student at the University of California, Santa Barbara. The killing started with him murdering his two housemates and their friends using a knife in his apartment. He picked them off one by one after they entered the property, stabbing them in the back, finishing them off, and then hiding their bodies and cleaning up the blood. He then uploaded his video, Day of Retribution, to YouTube, where he stated he would wage war against all the women of the world for sexually rejecting him. He also emailed his manifesto, My Twisted World, to family members and to his psychologist. In this 137-page document, he discusses his whole life and how the rejection he has faced from women has brought him to where he is now. He states, "Why does it have to be this way? I ask all of you. All I ever wanted was to love women, and in turn to be loved by them back. Their behaviour towards me has only earned my hatred, and rightfully so. I am the true victim in all of this. I am the good guy. Humanity struck at me first by condemning me to experience so much suffering. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. I didn't start this war. I wasn't the one who struck first. But I will finish it by striking back. I will punish everyone, and it will be beautiful. Finally, at long last, I can show the world my true worth." So it's pretty horrendous. Elliot then drove over to the Alpha Pi sorority house. His plan was to go in there and to go on a violent rampage with his gun, to kill all of them and then to burn down the house, before then getting back in his car and driving around Santa Barbara, shooting random people. So he was knocking on the door. Fortunately for all of the girls in this house, they didn't let him in. So instead, he chose to open fire on a few of the girls outside. He killed two of them, and then the third, he riddled her with bullets. I think she sustained about 5 gunshot wounds, but astonishingly, she survived. So afterwards, he then got back in his car and went on this gun rampage, firing out of his passenger side window with his semi-automatic pistol, and also driving into people as he wreaked havoc across this town. He killed another guy when he opened fire on a convenience store, and he injured about 23 people in total during this rampage. Eventually, the police intercepted him. They started firing at his car. They shot him in the hip. He crashed the car. He then turned the gun on himself, and he shot himself in the head. So that was the tragic, devastating Elliot Rodger rampage that resulted in 6 people dying, 7 including himself, 23 others being injured. Some people were horrifically injured, and the fact is, for them, they're never going to recover again. So, it was a really devastating, horrible incident. Okay, so, and he states in his manifesto, I cannot kill every single female on earth, but I can deliver a devastating blow that will shake all of them to the core of their wicked hearts. I will attack the very girls who represent everything I hate in the female gender, the hottest sorority of UCSB. In his writing and video recordings, Roger described his lifelong feelings of sexual frustration and social rejection by women, as well as his hatred for men engaged in successful heterosexual relationships. Roger's autobiography culminates in a graphic description of his ideal world, in which he states that women will be quarantined in concentration camps, where the vast majority of the female population will be starved to death, and he can watch it all gleefully. Okay, Tyberg then goes on to discuss the Stanford Mass Shootings of America project. She states there have been 238 mass shooting incidents since 1966, nearly half of which have occurred since 2010. So it's getting worse. Furthermore, 65 mass shooting incidents occurred in 2015, a 400% increase from 2014, and school shootings comprised 30% of all mass shootings in America. Tyberg states that there's one constant across all of these shootings. Men accounted for 96% of mass shooters and 96% of all school shooters. The majority of these male perpetrators are white and under the age of 25. She argues there are identifiable patterns. She then starts bringing in gender studies ideology into this situation, and I think this is where the whole thing becomes a lot more troubling, because she argues there are identifiable patterns that indicate larger connections between violence and the social world. Additionally, the tension between violent men and victimised women that typically characterises interpersonal gender violence is present in mass shootings. Women are twice as likely to die in a mass shooting incident, and in many cases, such as Elliot Rodgers, women are specifically selected as targets. She focuses on 10 selected shooting incidents that occurred in the past 20 years, and she looks at cases that exemplify how the perpetrator's relationship to masculinity helps to explain their attacks. She then explores how masculinity and misogyny function in the lives of school shooting perpetrators, and how these experiences reflect broader societal conceptions of gender. Her primary argument is that the social construction of masculinity is the root cause of these devastating events. She states the reinforcement of hegemonic masculinity in the US is problematic, perpetrating violence through its idealization of aggressive, dangerous behaviour in men and promotion of a gender hierarchy between men and women. These characteristics enforce a strict definition of masculinity and consequently encourage misogyny amongst men. In mainstream media, perpetrators of school shootings are often explained as mentally ill rather than conscious actors and architects who are shamed by harmful socialization. She argues that sociologists generally agree that gender is a social construct, unlike biologists who don't believe gender is a social construct because they actually know what they're talking about. Tyberg cites Judith Butler, who asserts that nobody is really a gender from the start, and that it all occurs as a result of socialization through our behaviours, actions and language that solidify the requirements for being a man or being a woman in society. This is unbelievably stupid. The idea that there is, that we are completely blank slates, from birth, and that it's only the processes of socialisation that turn us into men or women later on. It's unbelievably, incredibly stupid. It's completely disproven by science again and again, this idea. Yet we see sociologists and psychologists walking into the conversation, pretending they know what they're talking about, and promoting this idea that gender is a social construct. It blatantly isn't. There are significant physiological differences between men and women, and what we see is the socialisation process. In one way, it just adds to the difference in physiology between the two genders. And there's actual, if you see infants who are 1 day old, the boys will focus on a train set, for instance, or an item, that's basically a mechanical item that's to do with systems, whereas girls are more likely to focus on a face. And we see this all throughout childhood. The factual feminist, as she calls herself, Christina Hoff Sommers, she said that when her daughter was given a train by her son, what the daughter did with the train was she put it underneath a blanket so the train could get some sleep. So we see even when boys and girls play with toys that are made for the opposite gender, they do so in a way that, reinforces stereotypes made about their own gender. Maybe these stereotypes are there for a reason. Unbelievable this is. Tyberg goes on to state, in patriarchal America, the prevailing construction of gender supports a hierarchy of men maintaining power and privilege over women in society. Hegemonic masculinity promotes ideals such as emotional stoicism, physical strength, aggressiveness, competitiveness and independence that categorise men's importance by their ability to be autonomous, powerful and in control, to the exclusion of other, more sensitive traits. Oh, you mean feminist traits? Those traits that work in your favour if you're a woman, but make you look pathetic and weak if you're a man. This is unbelievable. There is a difference between the two genders, and there is a difference in terms of how adults see children and also men and women, how society works. There's a difference in expectation between the two genders, and what we see is that if a guy is competitive, aggressiveness to a certain degree, and independence and autonomy, those traits are favoured if you're a guy. Whereas if you're a woman and you're trying to attract a guy, then guys prefer not to see a woman who's very aggressive or who's highly competitive. So there is a difference in expectation between the two genders in terms of what they expect and what they desire in the other gender and what they like. And that's just genetics, and that just happens. And that's just the way it is. And you'll have to blame biology if you hate that. You'll have to blame DNA. I think it's a good thing that there's differences. If men and women were the same, they wouldn't actually be attracted to each other, and we wouldn't actually have any more children, and this whole species that we call humanity would die. So it's a good thing that there are differences between men and women. I'm just going to put that out there. Okay, so I'm just going to, move on past all of this gender social construction crap and get back onto the school shootings again. So she then brings up two good points, I think. Where's this one? Oh yeah, so I think that she brings up a really important point, which is the gun control debate. Newman 2004 acknowledges that limiting access to guns, although does not tackle the core of the issue, does provide another obstacle for potential killers to navigate when planning their attacks. I'm talking about the mass shootings that have occurred in the US in the last 20 years. So, mass murders tend not to happen in school or anywhere else where knives are the only weapons available. Advancements in gun technology and production have made guns more affordable, more widely available, more lethal, and the most frequently used weapon in homicides. In this way, for people who want to commit acts of violence, and particularly mass violence, where the goal is often to harm as many people as possible, the accessibility of guns makes these events more easily possible. And we clearly see this. Like, it's in the USA, we see far more mass shootings than anywhere else in the world. We see like tens of them every single year. We see thousands of victims, and it's this problem of this issue of gun control. It's it's a significant issue. The fact that these often at this point psychopathic young men who are able to then get access to guns, to semi-automatic guns, and to absolute hordes of ammunition is a reason, or it's fuel in their ability to actually engage in these attacks. Tyberg also brings up the issue of bullying and discusses the book No Easy Answers, which looks at the Columbine massacre, and shows that bullying was commonplace in the school Columbine, where there was this awful massacre back in 1999. And she says that the problem was the evangelical elite who had a great degree of control over that school. And they said they basically condoned bullying, and that they just didn't really bother to address it. Now I think this is a problem, because schools should deal with bullying as opposed to just let it happen. Because if they just let it happen, then the school will turn into, it just becomes like the book Lord of the Flies, where chaos reigns, where there is this ultra macho masculinity, bullying, aggression, and all of that. And then you get two dropouts, two outsiders, like I think it was it was Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, and they make the point in this book that they were the ones responsible for the massacre, but the school was responsible for creating them. Tyberg then focuses on 10 high school shootings in a thesis: the Columbine massacre, the Elliot Rodger massacre, the 2007 Virginia Tech massacre, and the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre. She asserts there are several common themes in the mentalities of the school shooting offenders. She states they are a distorted perception of women's relative social progress in post-industrial society, providing women more freedom to selectively choose sexual and romantic partners as personal rejection, seen in the eyes of the killers. A belief that violence will achieve justice and produce retribution for perceived injustices, and a transferal of blame and hatred toward one or more women onto all women. Okay, I'll admit that at the time that these people were incredibly, that they were showing a high degree of misogyny, they were showing a high degree of aggression, and a high degree of psychopathy as well. But I'm sorry, I just don't like this idea that it's okay to take these school shooters and then just thrust this label on them, because doing so means that you're never really going to get to the cause of why this is happening. And I agree with her 2 points, that gun control is a major issue. They just need to, I mean, like it works pretty well here in the UK where we don't have guns, you know, we have a lot less school shootings because school children are unable to access guns. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a no-brainer. And, you know, there is this issue of bullying. Of course, if you're a school administrator, if you're school staff, you want to stop bullying, because if it gets out of control, then it becomes chaos in that school. But there's another issue as well, which the mainstream media don't look at, and which Tyberg completely fails to see in her thesis. And that is the issue of fatherlessness. If we look at the issue of fatherlessness, we see that nearly all of these school shooters had a father who was distant, who wasn't there, who didn't, take them out playing sports when they were young, who didn't show them the facts of life when they were young. And in the case of Elliot Rodger, I believe the father provided an overly feminised way of looking after his son. He also, I don't think he protected his son very well against the actual threat he faced from the stepmom, Sumaya. And I believe he took Sumaya's side over everything, and at some points basically just threw his son out on the curbside so he could take her side of things. With Elliot Rodger, he grew up with his mum, and I think this was a bit of a disaster, because his mum, certainly, I don't think she provided an effective role model for him at all. I think what she did was she basically she gave him quite she gave him support and empathy and love, but what he was missing was the discipline, was the I guess building those skills, those masculine skills of autonomy, of strength, emotional strength, as well as physical strength, as well as going out to play sports. What we see, like with Elliot Rodger, his dad never took him out as a kid to play any form of sport. And, I think as a result of this, he had massive problems with socialising with his peers, with getting on with anyone in the social group at school. And all throughout, when he got to senior school, he spent pretty much the entire time playing World of Warcraft. And of course, he couldn't get on with anyone. Another thing I think we see with his this school shooting, maybe not so much with the others, was that he lived in LA, in sort of California, and that environment was it's an environment where there's incredible richness about. And also, so there's, a massive desire, I think, by everyone to be going up to the top, to be the next Hollywood actor, to be the next, supermodel, the next Miss USA. And he couldn't fit into that, especially not with, I believe, the failure of his dad to actually teach him any level of healthy masculinity. And, we see he just spent his entire secondary school playing World of Warcraft. I believe he was on antidepressants early in senior school, and he just overall just became obsessed by the fact that he wasn't getting laid and women were rejecting him. And in the end, this turned into a bitterness, into a hate of other people. And but by the end of it, when he wrote his document, My Twisted World, he was just a psychopath. And he engaged in this mass shooting where he killed 6 other people. With Adam Lanza as well, the guy who committed the Sandy Hook elementary school killing, where I believe he killed about 27 people. A horrendous tragedy. With Adam Lanza, he with his case, I believe he had a tenuous relationship with his father. Prior to the shooting, he hadn't seen his dad for 2 years, I believe his mum was living at home off alimony payments she was making to, the dad was making to her. And so I can't really see, a woman in that situation living, sponging off her ex-husband, and the boy's growing up in that environment. He's not really getting a good grounding in masculinity, and he's not really being taught how to be a man. His whole life really was just a failure because of fatherlessness. And we see with him, he was put on psychiatric meds from a young age. I believe he was on a cocktail of psychiatric drugs when he did the shooting. And the shooting was absolutely horrendous, the Sandy Hook one, because he killed, I believe he targeted a primary school purely on the basis that it would have, he was going to achieve a high body count by going into a primary school, because the kids there wouldn't be able to fight back against him, and the staff there would have been primarily female, so they wouldn't have been able to fight back against him to the same extent. I think this is, and this is a massive failure we see in the Western world. That's to do with men being kicked out of their family, through a divorce industry that profits off the collapse of the family, and a society that promotes single mums. And it's these extreme cases, they're horrendous, and they're awful for all of the people involved. And hundreds of innocent people are killed in these mass shootings. And one of the main reasons why this happens is fatherlessness. With Elliot Rodger, with Adam Lanza, with all of these school shooters, the problem of fatherlessness is right at the core of why this is happening. These boys are not being grounded in a useful, in a healthy masculine environment. They're not being taught to be good men as young kids, and so they're failing socially, so they're being ostracised, they're ending up as outsiders, they're being thrown on psychiatric meds, which furthers the extent to which they're cast as outsiders. They over time steadily become more and more psychopathic, and then eventually, they get access to all these firearms, and then they engage in these horrible school shootings. And I'm just saying, what we need to do in order to solve this problem, obviously gun control, but also feminism is a major contributor to these school shootings, because it promotes fatherlessness to the extent that it does. And, it's not just these people, it's a whole generation of young men who are now turning MGTOW, who are now, getting out of the relationship game, who are now not getting married and not having kids. And, I think, at the root cause of this is the promotion of fatherlessness by feminism, and the fact that so many boys are not being taught at a young age to develop good, strong, healthy, masculine skills, like, being autonomous, being emotionally strong and physically strong, and, just a bunch of other traits that people like in men when they grow up. And, as a result of this, I believe we're seeing if we look at marriage statistics in the UK, it's decreased by around 50% in the last 40 years. So in 1972, we had 480,000 marriages that year, whereas in 2011, we had 280,000 marriages in the UK in that year. And if we also consider, in the interim, we've had a massive promotion of immigration, and a lot of the immigrant communities who are coming over do have traditional family values, so a lot of them are getting married. But what we're seeing with the white indigenous UK population is there's a complete plummeting in the rate of marriages and in the rate of childbirth. And a lot of the children we're seeing who are being born now are being born into single mum families. And, so a lot of these families, the single mum is given a house and having her bills paid for her based on how many kids she has. So the more kids she has, the more free stuff she gets. And the product of this is, I call them the Jeremy Kyle generation. Thousands of people in the UK who are unable to get jobs, who are often drug addicts, who often end up in jail, who end up in the mental health system. And if we look at the extreme end of these people and the extreme end of fatherlessness, we see the high school shooters, not over here to the same extent because of gun control, but certainly over in the USA, we see the Elliot Rodgers, we see the Adam Lanzas, and all of these other psychopathic young men who have failed in such a horrendous way. And the root cause of this problem is fatherlessness. And the fatherlessness has been brought about by feminism, by this horrible hate movement that attacks everything masculine. We're seeing it now. It's in this report by Michael Kimmel that I referenced earlier in the talk. He basically says all of these traits that are masculine are negative traits, such as being competitive, being aggressive, being in control. But the thing is, those are the traits that women like, those are the traits that other men like, those are the traits that the job market likes. Those are good traits if you're a man. That's what other people look for if you're a man. That's what the man they want you to be, is someone who is, I wouldn't say aggressive in a, I'm going to bash someone's head in kind of way, but, certainly someone who's able to make their point, who's able to stand up for themselves, and also someone who is competitive, because, competition is a good thing. I believe. I think it was in the film, Jet Li film, Fearless. I really like this line in it. It's a martial arts film. He's facing off against this other fighter, and the other fighter says, it is in competition that we discover ourselves. So, competition is a good thing, despite what the feminists say. And, the same thing with being in control. Well, obviously not being in control is, I'd say that's a pretty rubbish thing. I say that is one of the attributes of being insane, of just a whole bunch of human failings. Whereas actually being in control is a good thing, and it's especially a good thing if you're a guy. Being stoic is a good thing. Being someone who's able to stand up to adversity, who's able to hold the course, is a good trait, and one that's especially liked if you're a man. And unless anyone's got any questions, I'm just going to finish by saying that these high school shootings in the USA, one of the main causes of this is fatherlessness, and that has been brought about by feminism, by the radical feminism that has seeped into our, political system in the last 40 years. And it's a direct war on masculinity. And these guys who become these psychopaths, I believe a huge reason why is because they're failed by their own fathers. Their own fathers are not there in many cases, and in the cases where they are there, they're often not helping their sons at all. They're often not helping their sons, taking them out to play sports, telling them the facts of life, creating a strong mind in their son, creating these masculine traits. And I think it's just horrendous what we're doing to boys in this system. And that's it. So if any questions on that, or if not, then thank you. Cheers. Thanks.